Millionaire freezes in shock upon seeing his missing daughter's pendant on the gas station attendant's neck. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the highway to Charleston, as Thomas Ellington eased his silver Mercedes into a modest gas station. The gleaming luxury car looked oddly out of place among the dusty pickup trucks and weathered sedans. Thomas rubbed his tired eyes, wondering why he'd chosen this particular route. 20 years, 20 long years since he'd traveled this road. 20 years since he'd lost everything that mattered. At 58, Thomas had the trim physique and tailored appearance of success. Designer suit, perfectly groomed silver hair, an air of quiet authority, the kind of man other men stepped aside for. Yet his eyes carried a hollowness no amount of wealth could fill. "Fill it up, premium," he told the attendant, then stepped out to stretch his legs. The warm, southern air carried the scent of magnolias and gasoline. He checked his watch. Another hour to Charleston, where a board meeting awaited him. Another acquisition. Another expansion of the Ellington empire. Empty victories. A young woman approached his car, skinny and quick-moving, no more than 23 or 24. Her faded blue uniform had seen better days, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. "Mind if I clean your windshield, sir?" Her voice was soft, but not timid. Thomas was about to decline when something caught his eye, something that made his heart stutter. Around the young woman's neck hung a silver pendant in the shape of a butterfly, with a small emerald embedded in its center. The late sunlight caught it just so, sending a green flash across his vision. Thomas froze, unable to speak. That pendant. He knew that pendant. He had designed it himself for his daughter Claire's 3rd birthday. A one-of-a-kind piece crafted by a jeweler in Manhattan. A butterfly because Claire loved chasing them in the garden. An emerald to match her eyes. "Sir, are you okay?" The young woman took a step back. Suddenly wary of the stunned expression on the wealthy stranger's face, Thomas found his voice, though it emerged strained and thin. "That necklace? Where did you get it?" The girl instinctively clutched the pendant, her defenses rising. "It's mine. My mother gave it to me when I was little. It's all I have of her." "Your mother?" Thomas could barely push the words out. "Well, I assume it was my mother." The young woman's gaze dropped. "I grew up in an orphanage in Savannah. I never knew my family. The nuns said I was found with this around my neck." Thomas felt his legs weaken. He steadied himself against the car. "What's your name?" "Hope." She took another step back. "Look, I need to get back to work." "Please," Thomas said, the desperation in his voice stopping her. "My daughter had a necklace exactly like that. She disappeared 20 years ago. She was 5 years old." Hope's expression shifted from wariness to something like pity. "I'm sorry about your daughter, sir, but lots of necklaces look similar. I'm sure it's just a coincidence." "No," Thomas said, his voice firmer now. "That pendant is one of a kind. I designed it myself." He reached for his wallet with trembling hands, producing a worn photograph protected in plastic. "This is Claire, my daughter." Hope hesitantly took the photograph. A little blonde girl with bright green eyes smiled back at her, wearing a summer dress in a sunlit garden. Around her neck was the same butterfly pendant. Something flickered across Hope's face. Recognition. Fear. She quickly handed the photo back. "I'm sorry. I don't know anything about your daughter." Thomas studied her face. Hope had brown hair, not blonde, and her eyes were hazel, not the vivid green of his Claire, but something in the shape of her face, the arch of her eyebrows. "How old are you?" he asked. 25, she answered, then corrected herself. "Well, they think I'm about 25. They weren't sure when I was found." The timing matched. The weight of possibility crushed the air from Thomas's lungs. "Would you?" His voice broke. He composed himself. "Would you have dinner with me tonight? I can tell you about the pendant." "About Claire, please." "I don't go to dinner with strange men," Hope said flatly. "Of course." Thomas pulled out a business card. "Here, look me up, Thomas Ellington, CEO of Ellington Industries. Call the main number to verify who I am." Hope glanced at the card, her expression softening slightly at the recognition of a name she'd seen in newspapers. "I'm staying at the Charleston Grand Hotel, please. Just an hour of your time. I'll pay you for it if you want." The moment the words left his mouth, he regretted them. Hope's expression hardened. "I'm not for sale, Mr. Ellington. That's not what I meant," Thomas said quickly. I've been searching for my daughter for 20 years, please." Something in his pleading tone reached her. Hope sighed. "My shift ends at 7. There's a diner across the street. Miller's. I'll meet you there at 7:30. Thomas nodded, afraid to push further. "Thank you." As Hope walked back toward the convenience store, Thomas noticed a small scar at the base of her neck, right where Claire had fallen from a swing at age 4. The diner was a time capsule of 1970s Americana. Vinyl booths, chrome accents, and the smell of coffee and grease. Thomas sat rigidly in a corner booth, out of place in his expensive suit. He'd arrived 20 minutes early, afraid Hope might change her mind. At 7:35, the bell above the door jingled. Hope had changed out of her uniform into jeans and a simple blouse. The butterfly pendant still hung around her neck. Thomas stood as she approached, old-school manners kicking in. "Thank you for coming." Hope slid into the booth across from him. "I'm still not sure why I'm here. That picture could have been photoshopped." Thomas opened his briefcase and pulled out an old photo album. "This is Claire, from birth to age 5. Hope flipped through the pages slowly. Claire as a newborn. Claire taking her first steps. Claire on a pony. Claire blowing out birthday candles. And in many of the later photos, the butterfly pendant. Claire disappeared on October 12th, 2005, Thomas said quietly. "She was playing in our garden in Charleston. I was on a business call. My wife was in the kitchen. When we went to check on her 15 minutes later, she was gone." Hope stared at the photos, an unfamiliar tightness in her chest. "I'm sorry, but I don't remember anything before the orphanage. Sister Agnes said I was found wandering in a farmer's market in Savannah in 2006. I was disoriented, couldn't remember my name or where I lived." Thomas leaned forward. "But you had the pendant." "Yes." Hope touched it reflexively. "They said it was the only thing I wouldn't let go of." Thomas pulled out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside was another butterfly pendant, identical to Hope's. This was the backup. Claire lost things constantly, so the jeweler made 2. His voice caught. "After she disappeared, I carried this everywhere, hoping I'd find her and could give it back." Hope stared at the twin pendants, a strange sensation washing over her. Flashes of memory, a garden filled with flowers, the sound of a piano, a woman's voice singing softly. "I've had dreams," she whispered, "about a big house with white columns, and someone calling a name. Not my name, but I knew they were calling me." Thomas's hands trembled as he placed a business card on the table. "I want to propose something. A DNA test. If it's negative, I'll never bother you again. If it's positive..." Hope's mind raced. Part of her wanted to run from this stranger and his impossible story. But another part, a deeper, more instinctual part, made her reach for the card. "I'll think about it," she said quietly, as she stood to leave. Thomas asked one more question. "Do you remember anything else? Anything at all from before you were found?" Hope paused, a distant look crossing her face. "Just fragments, a smell of jasmine, a butterfly garden, and sometimes in my dreams, I hear a music box playing." She shook her head. "Probably just things I made up to comfort myself." Thomas watched her walk away, hope and terror warring in his chest. In his pocket, he pulled out his phone and dialed. "Robert, it's me. I think I found her. I think I found Claire." In the shadows of the parking lot, a woman in a luxury SUV watched the exchange through binoculars. Her face tightening with fury, Vanessa Ellington reached for her phone, her manicured fingers trembling slightly as she dialed. "We have a problem," she hissed. "A big problem." Hope couldn't sleep that night. Her modest studio apartment above a laundromat in Derville, a small town 20 minutes from the gas station, felt suffocating. Thomas Ellington's business card sat on her nightstand, seemingly glowing in the darkness. She clutched her butterfly pendant, as she had done countless times throughout her life when anxiety struck. The cool metal against her palm had always brought comfort, a tangible connection to a past she couldn't remember. "This is crazy," she whispered to herself. Absolutely crazy. But was it? She'd always had dreams, vivid, recurring dreams of a big house with white columns, gardens full of flowers, and a sense of belonging she'd never experienced in waking life. Sister Agnes at St. Catherine's orphanage had always told her she had a good imagination. The child psychologist they'd brought in had called it compensatory fantasy, a way for an orphaned child to cope. But what if they weren't fantasies at all? Hope got up and pulled out her small wooden box of treasures. Inside were the few items that might give clues to her past: the butterfly pendant, a scrap of what might have been a pink blanket, and a small, smooth stone in the shape of a heart that she'd been holding when they found her. She turned on her laptop and typed Thomas Ellington, Charleston into the search engine. Hundreds of results appeared. Thomas Ellington, CEO of Ellington Industries, a corporation worth billions. Philanthropist, widower. His wife Marianne had died of cancer 12 years ago. And there it was, an old article about their daughter Claire, who had disappeared without a trace in 2005. A photo showed the Ellington family in happier times. Thomas, younger and smiling, his beautiful wife, and between them, a little girl with blonde curls and bright eyes. Hope stared at the child's face for a long time, searching for herself in those features. Could she really be Claire Ellington? The following evening, Thomas waited at Garland's, an upscale but discreet restaurant in Charleston. He'd chosen a private dining room at the back. Away from curious eyes, his attorney and oldest friend, Robert Sullivan, sat beside him. "Tommy, you need to manage your expectations," Robert cautioned. "This could be a coincidence, or worse. A scam?" Thomas finished for him. "I considered that, but you should have seen her face when she looked at Claire's photos. There was recognition there, Rob, and the pendant is identical, one of a kind. Pendants can be copied," Robert said gently. "Just be careful." The door opened, and Hope entered, looking uncomfortable in her best outfit, a simple blue dress that had seen better days. Thomas immediately stood. "Thank you for coming," he said warmly. "This is Robert Sullivan, my attorney and friend." Hope nodded cautiously as she took a seat. "I looked you up," she said directly to Thomas. "Your daughter really did disappear." "Yes," Thomas replied softly. "I'm not saying I'm her," Hope added quickly. "But I've agreed to the DNA test." Relief washed over Thomas's face. "Thank you." Robert cleared his throat. "My office has arranged for a reputable lab. They can take samples tonight if you're willing. Results would take about a week." Hope nodded, then turned to Thomas. "Tell me about her. About Claire. What was she like?" Thomas's eyes softened. "She was sunshine, always laughing, always curious. She loved butterflies, hence the pendant. She would spend hours in our garden, following them from flower to flower. She was learning piano, had a natural ear for it, and she loved to paint. At 4, she painted a blue butterfly that still hangs in the house. It's remarkable for a child that age." Hope listened intently, her food untouched. "And the day she disappeared," pain flashed across Thomas's face. "October 12th, 2005, a Wednesday, perfect fall day. Claire was playing in the garden. We have a large estate with security, so we thought it was safe. I was on a business call in my study. Marianne, my wife, was preparing lunch when she called Claire in. There was no answer." His voice broke slightly. "The garden gate was open. It's always kept locked. We called the police immediately." "What did they find?" Hope asked softly. "Nothing conclusive, no fingerprints except our gardeners, who had been there earlier, no witnesses. They searched for months. We hired private investigators, offered rewards. Nothing," Robert interjected. "It destroyed Thomas and Marianne's marriage. The guilt, the blame, the unanswered questions. Marianne never recovered," Thomas said quietly. "She passed away from cancer in 2013. But honestly, she began dying the day Claire vanished." Hope looked down at her untouched plate, an unexpected wave of emotion washing over her. "I'm sorry. What about you?" Thomas asked gently. "What do you remember about your childhood?" Hope tucked a strand of brown hair behind her ear. "Not much before the orphanage. I was found at a farmer's market in Savannah, confused and unable to tell anyone my name or where I lived. The police estimated I was around 6 years old when no one claimed me after several months. I was placed at St. Catherine's." "You never had flashbacks, dreams?" Robert asked. Hope hesitated. "Sometimes. I dream of a garden, white flowers that smell sweet at night. A piano playing somewhere inside a house. A woman singing." She touched her pendant. "And butterflies. I've always been drawn to them, though I don't know why." Thomas's eyes glistened. "Jasmine," he whispered. "We had Jasmine in the garden. Marianne played piano every evening. She used to sing Claire to sleep." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Hope finally spoke. "If I am Claire, why wouldn't I remember you clearly? My psychiatrist at the orphanage said I might have trauma-induced amnesia, but wouldn't some memories have returned by now? Trauma can do strange things to a child's mind," Robert offered, "especially at that age." Thomas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a tiny porcelain music box in the shape of a carousel. Claire carried this everywhere. It was her favorite. It played Claire de Lune. Hope stared at the music box, her heart racing. Thomas wound it gently, and the delicate melody filled the private dining room. The color drained from Hope's face. Her hands began to tremble. "I know this song," she whispered. "I hear it in my dreams." Thomas fought back tears. "Claire called it the moon song." Hope abruptly stood, overwhelmed. I need some air." She rushed out to the restaurant's garden terrace. Thomas followed at a respectful distance. He found her gripping the railing, taking deep breaths. "I'm sorry," he said. "This is all overwhelming." Hope nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When she finally turned to him, her eyes were filled with confusion and fear. "What happens if the test is positive? What happens if I really am Claire Ellington?" Thomas hesitated. "I don't know exactly, but you'd have a home, a family, your rightful place. And if it's negative, then I'll have to keep searching," he said simply. "But I'll always be grateful to you for giving me this chance." Hope looked out at the Charleston skyline, the weight of possibility pressing down on her. "My whole life could be a lie, or it could finally begin to make sense," Thomas replied gently. Inside the restaurant, Robert watched the pair through the window. His phone buzzed with a text. The message contained only 2 words. "Call me," the sender, Vanessa Ellington. Robert's expression darkened as he slipped the phone back into his pocket, his gaze returning to Thomas and the young woman who might change everything. Vanessa Ellington paced the marble floors of her penthouse, her Louboutin heels clicking like a metronome marking time until disaster. The Charleston skyline glittered beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, a view most would kill for. Vanessa had nearly done just that, 20 years ago. She stopped at her bar, pouring herself a 3rd scotch. The amber liquid trembled in the crystal glass, mimicking the shake in her perfectly manicured hands. She downed it in one swallow as her phone rang. "Robert, finally," she snapped. "What the hell is going on? We need to meet in person." Robert Sullivan's voice was measured, cautious. "Not over the phone. Fine. My place. 1 hour." She hung up without waiting for a response. Alone again, Vanessa moved to her desk and unlocked the bottom drawer with a key she kept on a chain around her neck. Inside was a worn manila folder. She hesitated before opening it, as if the contents might bite. The folder contained newspaper clippings about Claire's disappearance, police reports she'd obtained through bribery, and a single photograph of a man with cold eyes and a scar across his left cheek. Beneath it all was a single sheet of paper, with an account number in the Caymans. Proof of a transaction 20 years ago that had changed and ruined multiple lives. Vanessa's mind drifted back to that October day in 2005, the day everything changed. She watches from her car as her brother and sister-in-law frantically search the garden, calling Claire's name. Police arrive, then more police. The property is swarming with them. She feigns concern, rushing to comfort Thomas and Marianne. "We'll find her," she promises, knowing they never will. 3 hours earlier, she had met the man with the scar at a run-down motel outside of town. "Take her somewhere far," she had instructed. "The south, perhaps. Make sure she's never found." "What about the kid?" he had asked. "After I drop her off." "I don't care," Vanessa had replied coldly. "She just needs to disappear." The payment, $2 million. A fortune, yes, but nothing compared to what would eventually be hers when Thomas was too broken to run the company. Nothing compared to the inheritance that would have gone to Claire someday. An inheritance Vanessa had coveted since childhood, when it became clear their father favored Thomas in every way. The doorbell's chime jolted Vanessa back to the present. She quickly locked the folder away, composed herself, and opened the door. Robert Sullivan looked tired, his normally immaculate appearance slightly rumpled. He'd been Thomas's friend since college, his attorney for decades, and, for a brief time years ago, Vanessa's lover, a connection she had exploited more than once. "Drink," she offered. "No." He remained standing. "Thomas believes he's found Claire. Vanessa's practiced mask didn't slip. That's ridiculous. After 20 years, how many false alarms have there been? 6, 7. This is different. The girl has the butterfly pendant." At this, Vanessa nearly faltered. "That's impossible. It was with her when—" She stopped abruptly. Robert's eyes narrowed. "When what, Vanessa?" "When she disappeared." She recovered smoothly. "You know Thomas had that made specially." Robert studied her. "They're doing a DNA test." Vanessa turned away, ostensibly to refill her drink. "And when it comes back negative, Thomas will be devastated all over again. How cruel. What if it comes back positive?" The bottle clinked against the glass as her hand trembled slightly. "After 20 years, that's impossible." "Is it?" Robert moved closer. "The timing matches, the pendant matches, and there's something about her face, Vanessa. Something familiar." Vanessa turned, her eyes cold. "What exactly are you implying?" "Robert, I'm not implying anything. I'm just informing you of developments that affect the family and the company." The unspoken hung between them. If Claire returned, everything would change. The shares Thomas had transferred to Vanessa after the tragedy, the positions on the board she'd accumulated, the influence she wielded, all potentially at risk. "I appreciate the update," she said coldly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have calls to make." After Robert left, Vanessa poured another drink with shaking hands. Then she made a call. "It's me. We have a situation with the orphanage. I need all records of a girl named Hope, who arrived there in 2006 to disappear. Tonight." Director Jerome Wilkins of St. Catherine's Orphanage in Savannah was enjoying his evening bourbon when his phone rang. Seeing the number, his stomach clenched. "Ms. Ellington," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "The girl named Hope," Vanessa said without preamble. "The one who was found in 2006? I need everything. Her records, intake forms, medical history, psychological evaluations, all of it gone." Wilkins swallowed hard. "Ms. Ellington, those are official documents. If they were to disappear, there would be questions." She cut him off. "There will be far more questions if certain financial irregularities from 2006 come to light. Irregularities involving significant cash deposits to your personal account after you agreed to take in a child with no questions asked." Silence stretched between them. "I'll handle it tonight," he finally said. "Good. And Jerome, if anyone comes asking about Hope, you know nothing beyond the official story. She was found wandering, disoriented. No one claimed her. End of story." After hanging up, Wilkins moved to his office and unlocked a filing cabinet. Inside was a folder marked simply Hope. He removed the contents. Intake forms, psychological evaluations, medical records, and fed them into the shredder. But at the bottom of the folder was something he'd forgotten. A child's drawing of a big white house with columns and a garden full of butterflies. On the back, in crayon, was written, "Home," in a child's unsteady hand. He hesitated, then slipped this single item into his pocket instead of shredding it. "Insurance," he told himself, just in case. Thomas couldn't sleep. He sat in his study at the Ellington estate, a glass of untouched bourbon beside him, staring at Claire's photographs spread across his desk. Hope's face, her eyes, the shape of her mouth, the dimple in her right cheek, all echoed his missing daughter. His phone rang. The hospital. "Mr. Ellington, Dr. Harrison. I wanted to let you know your brother-in-law has been admitted with chest pains." Thomas frowned. "Brother-in-law, I don't have—" "Richard Ellington. He gave us your name as next of kin. There must be some mistake." But even as he said it, a cold feeling spread through his chest. Richard Ellington, the name of the man who had taken Claire, the kidnapper whose identity they'd never discovered. Someone was sending him a message. Thomas grabbed his car keys and rushed to the hospital. By the time he arrived, there was no Richard Ellington registered, no record of the call, Security footage showed no one matching the description of his old private investigator's sketch of the kidnapper. Back in his car, Thomas clutched his chest as a sharp pain radiated through it. The stress, the hope, the fear. It was all too much. The pain intensified. He fumbled for his phone, managed to dial Robert. "I think I'm having a heart attack," he gasped before everything went dark. Robert found Thomas slumped over in his car in the hospital parking lot. Within minutes, he was in the emergency room. The diagnosis, a mild heart attack brought on by extreme stress. "He needs rest," the doctor told Robert. "Absolutely no stress for at least 2 weeks." Robert nodded, then stepped out to make a call. Hope answered on the third ring, her voice groggy with sleep. "It's Robert Sullivan. Thomas has had a heart attack." "Oh my God, is he?" "He'll recover, but he needs rest. The DNA test will have to wait." "Of course. Should I visit him?" Robert hesitated. "Let me call you when he's stronger." After hanging up, Robert dialed another number. "Vanessa, Thomas is in the hospital. Mild heart attack." He paused. "No, I don't think you should visit. In fact, it might be best if you kept your distance until we sort all this out." In her penthouse, Vanessa hung up with a smile. Time. She had bought herself some time. Hope stood at the wrought iron gates of the Ellington estate, her heart hammering against her ribs. 2 weeks had passed since Thomas's heart attack. He'd been released from the hospital 3 days ago, and yesterday, Robert had finally called with an invitation. "He's asking for you," the attorney had said, "and he wants to show you the house." The gates swung open silently, and Hope drove her ancient Honda Civic up the long driveway, feeling increasingly out of place as the magnificent Georgian mansion came into view. 3 stories of white columned grandeur surrounded by meticulously landscaped gardens, even in early winter. The grounds were impeccable. She parked beside a fountain depicting a child with butterflies, and sat for a moment, gathering courage. Something about this place felt both terrifying and deeply familiar. The massive oak door opened before she could knock. Thomas stood there, paler and thinner than when she'd last seen him, but his eyes brightened at the sight of her. "Hope, thank you for coming." He extended his hand, which she took hesitantly. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Better every day." He ushered her inside. "Especially now." Hope stepped into a soaring foyer with a grand staircase that curved up to the second floor. Marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers, but it wasn't the opulence that took her breath away. It was the overwhelming sense of déjà vu. "I've been here before," she whispered, then caught herself. "I mean, it feels that way." Thomas watched her closely. "Would you like a tour?" Hope nodded, following him through elegant rooms filled with antiques and artwork. In the formal living room, her eyes were drawn to the grand piano by the window. Marianne played every evening, Thomas said softly. Claire would sit beside her on the bench, trying to copy her movements. Hope approached the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys. Without thinking, she pressed out the first notes of Claire de Lune. "I don't know how I know that," she said, pulling her hand back as if burned. "I've never had lessons." Thomas's eyes glistened. Claire was the same way. She could hear something once and play it by ear. They continued through the dining room with its table for 20, into a sunlit conservatory filled with plants and wicker furniture. Hope paused at the threshold, her eyes wide. "There were birds," she murmured. "Canaries in a white cage by the window." Thomas stared at her. "Yes, Marianne's canaries. We gave them away after Claire disappeared. We never mentioned them in our conversations." Hope shook her head, confused. "I don't know why I said that." As they climbed the grand staircase, Hope's hand instinctively reached for a spot in the oak banister. "There was a loose piece here," she said, running her finger over a now smooth section. "I used to wiggle it when no one was looking." Thomas nodded, emotion tightening his throat. Marianne had it fixed the year after, said it reminded her too much. At the top of the stairs hung a collection of family portraits. Hope stopped before one of Thomas and Marianne, taken perhaps 25 years earlier. "She was beautiful," Hope said. "She was," Thomas agreed. Claire looked like her. Same green eyes, same smile. Hope studied the portrait of the elegant blonde woman. "I don't look like her. Your hair and eye color changed," Thomas said gently. "Not uncommon in children." And there are other similarities. The shape of your face, your expressions. They continued down a hallway lined with doors. Thomas hesitated before one painted pale yellow with a butterfly wreath hanging on it. "This was Claire's room," he said. "We've kept it the same. I know that might seem strange, but we always hoped." He pushed the door open. Inside was a child's bedroom frozen in time. A canopy bed with a pink comforter. Bookshelves filled with children's books. A small desk and toys neatly arranged. On one wall was a large mural of a garden with butterflies. "I painted that for her 5th birthday," Thomas said. She loved butterflies so much. Hope stood motionless in the center of the room, overwhelmed. Images flashed through her mind, reading books in the canopy bed, playing with dolls on the window seat, dressing up in the costumes still hanging in the open closet. Her eyes were drawn to a small easel in the corner. Beside it, framed on the wall, was a child's painting of a blue butterfly. "I painted that," she whispered, then immediately looked startled at her own words. "No," Thomas said gently. "That painting was done by Claire when she was 4. Hope walked closer to the painting, studying the childish brushstrokes. "The blue butterfly," she murmured. "I mixed the colors myself. You taught me how. Ultramarine blue with just a touch of violet." Thomas inhaled sharply. "Yes, that's exactly right." Hope turned away, visibly shaken. "I don't understand what's happening." "I think parts of you remember, even if your conscious mind doesn't," Thomas said. They continued the tour, Hope growing increasingly unsettled as more moments of recognition occurred. The kitchen where she somehow knew cookies were kept in the ceramic jar shaped like a beehive. The library with the secret door behind the bookshelf that led to a small reading nook. The exact spot in the garden where a tire swing had once hung. They ended in Thomas's study, where he poured himself a small scotch with shaking hands through the window. Hope could see the garden where Claire had vanished 20 years before. "It's a lot to take in," Thomas said, noticing her overwhelmed expression. "It's impossible," Hope replied. "Either I've been here before, or you're Claire," Thomas finished softly. The door to the study burst open, and a striking woman in her mid-50s entered. Tall, slim, with dark hair cut in a severe bob and wearing an impeccable charcoal suit. She radiated cold authority. "Tommy, I came as soon as I heard you were home from the hospital," she announced, then stopped abruptly at the sight of Hope. "I didn't realize you had company." Thomas straightened. "Vanessa, this is Hope. Hope, my sister Vanessa." Vanessa's eyes narrowed as she assessed Hope from head to toe. "Hope, what an unusual name." "It's what they called me at the orphanage," Hope replied, immediately disliking this woman though she couldn't say why. "Orphanage," Vanessa raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "How interesting. And what brings you to my brother's home?" Before Hope could respond, Thomas intervened. "Hope is here at my invitation. Vanessa, we're discussing a private matter." Something dangerous flashed in Vanessa's eyes. "Private, between my brother and a complete stranger. I think as your sister and business partner, I have a right to know what's going on." "Not now," Thomas said firmly. Vanessa glanced between them, then forced a tight smile. "Of course. You're still recovering. We'll talk later." She turned to Hope. "Lovely to meet you, Hope. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other." After she left, Hope released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "She doesn't like me. Vanessa doesn't like most people," Thomas said diplomatically. "She's been difficult since we were children. Our father favored me, and she never forgave either of us for it." Hope nodded, but something about the woman had disturbed her deeply. A memory tried to surface. A voice, angry and cold, but it slipped away before she could grasp it as she prepared to leave. The elderly housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, appeared with a tea tray. "I thought you might like some refreshment before your drive," she said kindly. Setting down the tray, Hope thanked her, accepting a cup of tea as she reached for a cookie. Mrs. Winters gasped softly. "Is something wrong?" Hope asked. The old woman stared at her. "No, miss. It's just the way you take your tea. 2 sugars. Splash of milk. Stirred counterclockwise 3 times." She swallowed hard. "That's exactly how little Claire liked her tea." Hope set down the cup with trembling hands. "I should go." Thomas walked her to the door. "The DNA results should be back next week." "But Hope, I think we already know what they'll say." In her car, Hope sat gripping the steering wheel, too shaken to drive immediately. Through the windshield, she could see the mansion looming against the darkening sky, a home that might be hers, a past that terrified her as she finally pulled away. She didn't notice the elegant black Audi following at a discreet distance. Thomas paced his study, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand tapping a nervous rhythm against his thigh. "Yes, I understand," he said tensely. "Just email me the results immediately." He ended the call and turned to Robert, who sat watching him with concern. "They're sending the report now," Thomas said, moving to his laptop. "After a week of waiting, we'll finally know." "Are you prepared for either outcome?" Robert asked carefully. Thomas's hands hovered over the keyboard. "If it's negative, I'll survive. I've had 20 years of disappointment. But if it's positive, Rob..." The computer chimed with a new email. Thomas opened it with trembling fingers, scanning the document that would either crush or confirm his deepest hopes. "Probability of paternity, 99,097%. He read aloud, his voice breaking. "She's Claire. She's my daughter." Robert moved to his friend's side, gripping his shoulder as Thomas broke down. 20 years of grief and hope colliding in racking sobs. "She's alive," Thomas kept repeating. "My little girl is alive." When he finally composed himself, Thomas reached for his phone. "I need to tell her." "In person," Robert advised. "This isn't news for a phone call." Thomas nodded and began making calls. To his driver, to Mrs. Winters to prepare the house, to a florist for a welcome arrangement. In his excitement, he missed the call from Vanessa. Hope was restocking the cooler at the gas station when her phone vibrated in her pocket. The text from Robert was simple. "Thomas would like to see you at the house this evening at 7. "Important news." Her heart raced. The DNA results. She'd thought about little else for days, oscillating between hope and terror. If she was Claire Ellington, what did that mean for the person she'd been for 20 years? If she wasn't, what then? "You okay?" her manager asked, noticing her pale face. "Yeah, I might need to leave a little early today, family thing." The word family felt strange on her tongue, hopeful and dangerous all at once. At 6, she clocked out and drove home to shower and change into her nicest outfit, a simple navy dress she'd bought on clearance for job interviews. Her hands trembled as she fastened the butterfly pendant around her neck. The drive to the Ellington estate felt both endless and too short as the gates opened for her. Hope's stomach clenched with anxiety. Whatever happened tonight, her life would never be the same. This time, both Thomas and Robert waited at the door to greet her. One look at Thomas's face, alight with joy and tears, told her everything. "It's positive, isn't it?" she said quietly. Thomas nodded, unable to speak. He opened his arms hesitantly, and after a moment's pause, Hope stepped into them. The embrace was awkward at first, then tightened as something broke loose inside her. A dam of emotion she hadn't known was there. "Welcome home, Claire," Thomas whispered. The name sent a shiver through her. Claire Ellington. Her name. Inside, Mrs. Winters had prepared a small celebration dinner. Champagne waited in a silver bucket, and a cake with "Welcome Home" written in elegant script sat on the sideboard. "I hope it's not too much," Thomas said, noting her overwhelmed expression. "We can take things slowly." Hope, Claire, nodded gratefully. "I'm still processing. It's like waking up in the middle of someone else's life." "It's your life," Thomas said gently. "A life that was stolen from you." Over dinner, they discussed practical matters, how to announce her return, the legal process of reclaiming her identity, where she would live during the transition. "I'd like you to move in here, of course," Thomas said, "but I understand if that's too sudden." Claire considered this. The mansion both attracted and intimidated her. "Maybe we could start with weekends," she suggested. "I still need to give notice at work, pack my apartment." "Of course," Thomas agreed quickly. "Whatever makes you comfortable. And I'd like to keep using the name Hope. At least for now," she added. "It's been my identity for 20 years. I need time to adjust to being Claire. We'll take it one day at a time," Thomas promised as they spoke. Claire felt a curious sensation, like puzzle pieces shifting into place inside her mind. Memories surfaced in fragments, running through these rooms as a child. the smell of her mother's perfume, the sound of laughter echoing off marble floors. "I remember bits and pieces," she said wonderingly. "Little flashes, like snapshots from a story I was told long ago." Thomas smiled through tears. "Your mind protected you by burying those memories, but they're still there." After dinner, Robert excused himself to take a call. When he returned, his expression was grim. "That was my contact at the Charleston Post. Somehow they got wind of the story. They're running it tomorrow. Ellington heiress returns after 20 years. Thomas frowned. "How could they know?" "Someone leaked the DNA results," Robert said. "They have the lab report." Claire paled. "So everyone will know, just like that." "I'm afraid so," Robert confirmed. "We need to prepare for significant media attention." Thomas took Claire's hand. "We'll face it together. I have experience handling the press." Claire nodded, though dread pooled in her stomach. Her simple life was evaporating before her eyes. Vanessa slammed the newspaper down on her breakfast table the next morning, her coffee forgotten. The headline blared, "Miracle Return, Ellington Heiress Found After 20 Years." Beneath it was a side-by-side comparison of Claire's childhood photo and a recent picture of Hope, clearly taken without her knowledge, highlighting their similarities. "Damn it," Vanessa hissed. Her phone rang. Her assistant, Marina. "Have you seen it?" Marina asked without preamble. "Of course I've seen it," Vanessa snapped. "The office is flooded with calls. Board members want an emergency meeting. What should I tell them?" Vanessa pinched the bridge of her nose. "Tell them I'm handling it, and get me everything you can find on this Hope person. Every detail, no matter how small." After hanging up, Vanessa poured herself a generous scotch. Despite the early hour, 20 years of careful planning, of building her position in the company, of establishing herself as Thomas's heir, all threatened by this imposter. "She can't be Claire," Vanessa muttered. "It's impossible." But deep down, she knew it wasn't. The girl had survived, against all odds, against all her careful plans. Vanessa reached for her phone again and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. "It's Vanessa Ellington. I need to speak to Jerome Wilkins. It's urgent." The media frenzy hit with the force of a hurricane. Reporters camped outside both the Ellington estate and Claire's apartment. Her phone rang constantly with interview requests. Childhood friends, teachers, and distant relatives emerged, claiming to remember little Claire Ellington. Thomas hired security for both homes and arranged for Claire to take a leave of absence from her job. The gas station owner, sensing opportunity, gave interviews about his special connection to the Ellington heiress. Through it all, Claire retreated into herself, overwhelmed by the attention and the accelerating changes in her life. The fragments of memory continued to surface, often triggered by seemingly insignificant things. The scent of a particular soap, the sound of a clock chiming, the texture of the satin curtains in the east sitting room. But with the pleasant memories came darker ones. She began having nightmares, vivid, terrifying dreams of being taken, of a man with cold eyes and a scarred face, of being locked in a dark place that smelled of chemicals, and something else, a woman's voice giving orders, a voice that sounded familiar, though she couldn't place it. 1 week after the news broke, Claire sat with Thomas in his study, reviewing family photo albums. As she turned a page, she gasped. There was Vanessa, 20 years younger, standing beside Thomas and Marianne at a garden party. Claire's small finger trembled as she pointed to her. "She was there," Claire whispered. "The day I was taken, I heard her voice." Thomas stared at his daughter, then at the photo of his sister. "Claire, are you saying—" Before she could answer, Mrs. Winters appeared at the door, her face ashen. "Mr. Ellington, there's a detective here to see you. He says it's about Claire." The man who entered was in his 60s, weathered and grim. He introduced himself as Detective Morris, retired from Charleston PD. "I worked your daughter's case 20 years ago," he explained. "Never forgot it when I saw the news." He placed a sealed envelope on the desk. "This came to me last week. The sender is dead now, heart attack. But he wanted this delivered to you if anything ever happened to him." Thomas opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a confession letter from a man named Frank Dawson, describing how he had kidnapped Claire Ellington on October 12, 2005, at the instruction of a woman who had paid him $2 million. He never named the woman, Detective Morris said, but he left this. He placed a small voice recorder on the desk. Dawson was old school, recorded all his business meetings on tape. For insurance, he said. Thomas pressed play, and a female voice filled the room. Cold, commanding, unmistakable. Take her far away. South, perhaps. Make sure she's never found. Claire's face drained of color. That's her, she whispered. That's the voice I hear in my nightmares. Thomas looked up, his expression hardening to stone. That's Vanessa. The recording of Vanessa's voice hung in the air like poison gas, suffocating everyone in Thomas's study. Play it again, Thomas said, his voice dangerously quiet. Detective Morris obliged once more. Vanessa's unmistakable voice filled the room. Take her far away, south, perhaps. Make sure she's never found. Thomas gripped the edge of his desk until his knuckles turned white. My own sister. Claire sat frozen, fragments of memories colliding in her mind. A woman's angry voice, the smell of an unfamiliar perfume, a flash of dark hair as she was carried away. What do we do now? She whispered. Thomas straightened, his expression hardening into something Claire hadn't seen before. The ruthless businessman who had built an empire. We need to be strategic, he said. Morris, can we use this recording legally? The detective grimaced. It's complicated, obtained without consent, chain of custody issues. Might not stand up in court, but it's powerful leverage. Thomas nodded. Robert, we need to move quickly. Call Judge Harrison. He owes me a favor. We'll need a warrant before Vanessa can destroy evidence. Thomas, Robert cautioned, we should think this through. Accusing Vanessa publicly will create a scandal that could damage the company. The foundation. She stole my daughter. Thomas's fist crashed onto the desk. She destroyed my family, my marriage. Marianne died never knowing what happened to our child. Claire stood suddenly. I need some air. She hurried from the room, out onto the terrace where the evening air was heavy with the scent of jasmine. Her head spun with the implications of what they'd just heard. Her own aunt had orchestrated her kidnapping, had paid to have her taken away, her memory erased, her life stolen. Thomas joined her a few minutes later. I'm sorry, he said quietly. This must be overwhelming. Claire nodded, unable to speak. We don't have to decide everything tonight, he continued. But we do need to protect you. Vanessa is dangerous, now more than ever. She doesn't know about the recording, Claire said. Maybe we could confront her privately first, get her to confess, avoid a public scandal. Thomas studied his daughter with new respect. That's actually a good strategy, but not yet. First, we need to strengthen your position. The media is already questioning your identity. Vanessa's doing. I'm sure. We need to counter that. The next morning's edition of the Charleston Post carried a front-page exclusive. Ellington heiress speaks. I remember my childhood home. The article detailed Claire's memories of the mansion, backed by confirmation from longtime staff members. Accompanying photos showed Claire in the Ellington Gardens, standing beside Thomas with the butterfly pendant prominently displayed. Vanessa threw the newspaper across her breakfast table with a snarl. Her phone rang immediately. Marina, her assistant. Have you seen the Post? Marina asked. Of course I've seen it, Vanessa snapped. That little fraud is playing this perfectly. The board members are asking questions. They want to know your position on Claire's return. Vanessa's mind raced. Tell them I'm delighted by the possibility that my niece has been found. But as a businesswoman, I'm proceeding with appropriate caution until all facts are verified. After hanging up, Vanessa poured herself a drink, despite the early hour. She needed to act quickly. The girl knew too much, remembered too much. The DNA test was a problem, but DNA could be manipulated by the right people with the right incentives. Vanessa called Jerome Wilkins again. I need you to make a statement to the press, she instructed. Cast doubt on Hope's background. Suggest she might have been manipulating her way toward the Ellington fortune for years. I can't do that, Wilkins protested. The girl was genuinely found with no memory. There's documentation. Documentation you've conveniently lost, Vanessa reminded him. Or would you prefer I share the details of our financial arrangement with the authorities? Wilkins reluctantly agreed. Next, Vanessa called her contacts at several tabloid newspapers, planting stories questioning Claire's motives and the convenience of her sudden memories. By afternoon, headlines across the city read, "Gold digger or lost heiress," and "Questions surround Ellington miracle." Claire scrolled through the news on her phone, her stomach churning at the vicious headlines. "Don't read that trash," Thomas advised, taking the phone gently from her hands. "We expected this." They were meeting with Thomas's PR team, mapping out a strategy to counter Vanessa's media offensive. The elegant conference room at Ellington Industries buzzed with activity as consultants and lawyers debated the best approach. "We need to humanize her," suggested Alicia Morgan, the head of PR. "Show the public the real Claire, not just the heiress, her work at the gas station, her struggles, her genuine reconnection with her father, and emphasize the DNA evidence," added Jonathan Kim, Thomas's chief legal counsel. 97% is practically irrefutable. Robert leaned forward. "We should also prepare for Vanessa's next move. She'll try to discredit the DNA testing, claim it was manipulated." Claire, who had been quiet during most of the meeting, suddenly spoke up. "What about my mother's personal items? Would any of them have her DNA we could compare to mine as additional proof?" The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. Thomas smiled slowly. "That's brilliant, Claire. Marianne's hairbrush, her jewelry with traces of skin cells. They're all preserved in her dressing room. We could do a maternal DNA match as well." The PR team quickly incorporated this into their strategy. By the end of the day, they had arranged for a second, independent DNA test comparing Claire's DNA to samples from both Thomas and preserved items of Marianne's. As they wrapped up, Claire's phone rang, an unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Hope, this is Marina Chen, Vanessa Ellington's assistant." Claire signaled frantically to Thomas, who quickly had the call traced and recorded. "Ms. Chen," Claire replied evenly. "What can I do for you?" I need to meet with you. Privately. There are things you should know about Mrs. Ellington. Things I've seen and heard." Claire's pulse quickened. "What kind of things?" "Not over the phone," Marina insisted. "Please. It's important. Can you meet me tonight at the River Cafe, 8 o'clock? After hanging up, Claire turned to Thomas and Robert. "It could be a trap." "Almost certainly," Robert agreed. "But it could also be legitimate. Marina has worked for Vanessa for years. She would know things." "I'll go with security," Claire decided. "Nearby, but not visible." Thomas looked worried, but nodded. "We'll have the best team with you." The River Cafe sat on Charleston's waterfront, its patio twinkling with fairy lights. Claire arrived early, selecting a table with a clear view of both entrances. 2 security officers posed as diners at nearby tables, while others monitored the perimeter. At 8 precisely, Marina Chen arrived, a petite Asian woman in her 30s, impeccably dressed but visibly nervous. She scanned the restaurant before approaching Claire's table. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sitting down. "I'm taking a significant risk." "Why?" Claire asked directly. "Why help me against your own employer?" Marina's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "Because what she did to you was monstrous. And because she's planning something worse." Claire leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "Vanessa has always been ruthless. But lately, she's become desperate. I've overheard phone calls, seen documents." Marina lowered her voice. "She's trying to manipulate board members. Spread rumors that Thomas is mentally unstable, grieving so deeply he's invented this fantasy of finding you. We have DNA proof," Claire pointed out. "She's working on discrediting that too, and..." Marina hesitated. "I think she might be planning something more direct. Yesterday she met with a man I've never seen before, rough-looking. They spoke privately, but afterward, I heard her say your address." A chill ran down Claire's spine. "You think she's targeting me physically?" "I don't know, but I'm afraid for you." Marina pulled out a thumb drive. "This contains emails, financial records, calendar entries, everything I could gather that might help protect you, including records of payments to someone named Jerome Wilkins dating back 20 years. Claire accepted the drive, studying Marina carefully. "Why are you really doing this?" Marina's professional facade cracked slightly. "My younger sister disappeared when I was a child. They never found her. When I realized what Vanessa had done to you, what she was still doing. I couldn't be part of it anymore. As they continued talking, neither noticed the photographer discreetly capturing their meeting from across the street, nor the black Audi idling half a block away, Vanessa watching through tinted windows, her face contorted with fury. The next morning, Thomas was awakened by Robert's urgent call. "Turn on the news now." Thomas grabbed the remote, switching on the bedroom television. The headline made his blood run cold. Ellington heiress caught conspiring with corporate insider. Photos showed Claire meeting with Marina, the images edited to make their conversation appear secretive and suspicious. The accompanying article suggested they were plotting a corporate takeover, citing anonymous sources, who claimed Claire had been planning to infiltrate the Ellington family for years, with Marina as her inside accomplice. Worst of all, a final paragraph mentioned that Marina Chen had been involved in a serious car accident late last night and was in critical condition. Thomas called Claire immediately when she answered. Her voice was thick with tears. "She tried to warn me," Claire said, "and now Vanessa's tried to kill her too." Marina Chen clung to life in the IQ at Charleston Memorial, machines breathing for her after what police initially called a single-vehicle accident. But the thumb drive she had given Claire told a different story. Thomas, Claire, Robert, and Detective Morris gathered in Thomas's secure home office, reviewing the contents on an isolated computer. What they found left them stunned. "Look at this," Robert said, pointing to a spreadsheet. Regular payments to Jerome Wilkins starting October 2005, the month Claire disappeared, continuing through 2006. And here, Thomas added, opening another file, email exchanges about handling the situation and ensuring permanent separation. They're carefully worded, but the intent is clear. Claire, who had been quiet, suddenly straightened. These calendar entries. The day I disappeared, Vanessa had a meeting scheduled with someone identified only as FD at a motel outside Charleston. Frank Dawson, Detective Morris said grimly, the kidnapper who confessed in the letter. Thomas clicked on another folder labeled Surveillance. Inside were recent photos of Claire at her apartment, at work, meeting with Thomas, dozens of them spanning the past month. "She's been having me watch since the moment Thomas found me," Claire whispered. Morris leaned forward. "And look at this. Emails to Dr. Raymond Peterson at Coastal Medical Labs, discussing how to ensure favorable test interpretations and manage DNA result optics with mentions of substantial consulting fees. She tried to manipulate the DNA tests," Thomas said, his voice tight with fury, "but failed," Robert noted. The results were genuine. Claire opened a video file, security footage from Vanessa's office. It showed Vanessa meeting with a heavy-set man with a military-style haircut. "That's the day before Marina's accident," Claire said, checking the timestamp. They watched as Vanessa handed the man an envelope. Though there was no audio, her lips were clearly visible as she said, "Make it look like an accident." The evidence was damning. Vanessa had orchestrated Claire's kidnapping, attempted to discredit her return, and now had tried to murder Marina to silence her. Thomas reached for his phone. "I'm calling Judge Harrison. We need an arrest warrant immediately." "Wait," Claire said, placing her hand on his arm. "Once we move legally, everything becomes public. The company, the family name. Everything will be dragged through the mud. Maybe there's another way." Thomas looked at his daughter with surprise. "You're concerned about the company, after what she did to you." Claire met his gaze steadily. "I'm concerned about you, your life's work, the thousands of people who depend on Ellington Industries for their livelihoods. We need to be smart about this." Detective Morris nodded approvingly. "She's right. If we move too quickly, Vanessa might destroy evidence or flee. We need to catch her red-handed." Robert stroked his chin thoughtfully. "What if we confront her privately first? Get her to confess. Record it legally this time. She'd never admit anything to us." Thomas objected. "Not to you," Claire said quietly, "but maybe to me." The plan was set for the following evening. Claire would meet Vanessa at the Ellington Industries headquarters, ostensibly to discuss a settlement to leave Charleston and renounce any claim to the Ellington name or fortune. The conference room would be wired with legally approved recording devices, with Detective Morris and 2 officers monitoring from an adjacent room. As Claire prepared in Thomas's study, her father paced anxiously. "It's too dangerous," he said for the 10th time. Vanessa is unpredictable, desperate. She won't hurt me in the company headquarters, Claire reassured him. Too many witnesses, too much security. You don't know what she's capable of. Actually, I do, Claire replied softly. Better than anyone. Thomas stopped pacing, studying his daughter's face. In the weeks since they'd found each other, he'd watched her transform from a hesitant, uncertain young woman into someone with remarkable strength and poise. Claire Ellington was emerging from behind Hope's protective shell. "You're so like your mother," he said, his voice thick with emotion. She had that same quiet determination. Claire smiled, touching the butterfly pendant at her neck. "I wish I could remember her more clearly." "You will," Thomas promised. "The memories are coming back more each day." He was right. Claire's childhood was returning in fragments, playing piano with her mother, gardening with Mrs. Winters, weekend sailing trips with her father, and darker memories too, the day of the kidnapping, a hand covering her mouth, a car trunk, a small room that smelled of chemicals where she was kept until her memories began to fade. At 7, Robert arrived with the final preparations. "The recording equipment is set. Morris and his team are in position. Are you ready?" Claire nodded, smoothing her simple black dress, chosen deliberately to project seriousness rather than wealth. "Remember," Robert cautioned, "you need to get her to explicitly admit to ordering the kidnapping. The more detail, the better." "I understand," Claire said calmly. Thomas embraced her tightly. "Be careful, sweetheart. I can't lose you again." Ellington Industries occupied the top 10 floors of a gleaming downtown skyscraper. Claire arrived alone, as planned, and was escorted to the executive conference room on the top floor. The space was impressive, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Charleston, a massive table of polished mahogany, and subtle displays of the company's global reach and influence. Vanessa kept her waiting for 15 minutes, a power play Claire had anticipated. When she finally entered, she wore an impeccably tailored crimson suit, her dark hair swept into a severe chignon. "Hope, or should I say Claire?" Vanessa's voice dripped with condescension. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Claire remained seated, refusing to stand in deference. "I'm here to discuss terms." Vanessa smiled thinly, taking a seat across from her. "Smart girl. I've always believed everything has a price." She opened her briefcase, removing a folder. "I'm prepared to offer you $5 million to leave Charleston, renounce any claim to the Ellington name, and sign an NDA regarding Thomas in this unfortunate situation." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Unfortunate situation? You mean my kidnapping, my stolen life, or the fact that you tried to murder Marina Chen when she revealed your crimes?" Vanessa's smile didn't waver. "Dramatic accusations from a con artist. Marina's accident was tragic, but entirely unrelated to your little scheme." "It's not a scheme," Claire said evenly. "The DNA test confirmed I'm Claire Ellington." "DNA tests can be manipulated," Vanessa countered, "especially when there's billions at stake." Claire leaned forward slightly. "Why do you hate me so much? What did I ever do to you?" Something flickered in Vanessa's eyes, a flash of the genuine hatred behind the polished exterior. "You were born," she said coldly. "That was enough. So you admit you had me kidnapped." Vanessa laughed. "I admit nothing. I'm offering you a way out. $5 million and a fresh start. More money than you would make in a lifetime at that pathetic gas station." Claire shook her head. "Not enough. Not for 20 years. 10 million then?" Vanessa countered. "My final offer?" "I think we both know this isn't about money," Claire said. "This is about what you did 20 years ago. The man you hired, Frank Dawson." Vanessa's composure slipped for a split second before she recovered. "I don't know anyone by that name." "He's dead now," Claire continued. "Heart attack. But before he died, he left a confession and a recording." The color drained from Vanessa's face. "You're bluffing. Your exact words were, 'Take her far away. South, perhaps, make sure she's never found.'" Claire's voice was steady, her gaze unwavering. "Your voice is quite distinctive, Aunt Vanessa." Vanessa stood abruptly, gathering her papers. "This meeting is over." "Why?" Claire pressed, remaining seated. "Why did you do it? For the money? The company? Was it worth destroying so many lives?" Vanessa paused, something dark and wounded surfacing in her expression. "You don't understand. You were the golden child, the precious heir. Thomas always had everything. Father's love, the company, a perfect family. What did I get? Scraps from the table. So you punished a 5-year-old child. I gave you a different life," Vanessa hissed, her careful facade cracking. "Away from this toxic family, this legacy of favoritism and neglect. You should thank me." Claire stood now, facing her aunt across the table. "Thank you for having me kidnapped, for destroying my parents' lives, for trying to kill Marina when she exposed you." "Marina was stupid and disloyal," Vanessa snapped. "Just like that idiot Dawson, who couldn't even make sure you stayed lost. I paid him $2 million to make you disappear permanently, and instead he dumps you at a market where anyone could find you." The words hung in the air between them. Vanessa froze, suddenly realizing what she'd admitted. "This conversation is over," she said, moving toward the door. It opened before she reached it. Detective Morris stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. "Vanessa Ellington," Morris said formally. "You're under arrest for the kidnapping of Claire Ellington, the attempted murder of Marina Chen, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent." As the officers led a stunned Vanessa away, Claire sank into a chair, adrenaline draining from her body. Through the glass wall, she saw Thomas hurrying toward her, his face a mixture of anguish and relief. The nightmare was finally ending, but the healing had only just begun. Vanessa's arrest sent shockwaves through Charleston's elite circles. The media descended like vultures, the story too sensational to ignore. Prominent businesswoman arrested for kidnapping her own niece 20 years ago. Thomas called an emergency board meeting at Ellington Industries to contain the damage. While Claire had been officially welcomed back to the family, she still felt like an outsider in the corporate world her father and aunt inhabited. Nevertheless, she insisted on attending. "You don't have to do this," Thomas told her as their car approached the company headquarters 3 days after Vanessa's arrest. "Yes, I do," Claire replied firmly. "I need to see this through." The boardroom fell silent as they entered. 12 people sat around a massive table, men and women in expensive suits, their faces masks of professional concern, hiding ravenous curiosity. "Thank you all for coming," Thomas began, standing at the head of the table with Claire beside him. "As you're aware, my sister Vanessa has been arrested for crimes related to the disappearance of my daughter Claire 20 years ago. This is obviously a deeply personal tragedy for our family, but I want to assure everyone that it will not affect the stability or operations of Ellington Industries." A silver-haired man cleared his throat. "Thomas, the board sympathizes with your personal situation, but we must address the practical implications. Vanessa controlled 26% of company shares and held key relationships with our Asian partners. I'm prepared to buy back Vanessa's shares," Thomas replied, "and Claire will be stepping into a leadership role once she's had time to adjust." Murmurs rippled around the table. A woman in her 60s spoke up. "With all due respect, Mr. Ellington, your daughter has no business experience. She's been working at a gas station." "For heaven's sake," Claire felt her cheeks burn, but kept her expression neutral. Thomas's jaw tightened. "My daughter has shown remarkable intelligence and adaptability. She will receive the proper training and education. In the meantime, I'll personally handle Vanessa's responsibilities." The meeting continued for an hour, with the board grudgingly accepting Thomas's solutions. As they were concluding, his phone rang, the district attorney's office. "We need to go," he told Claire after hanging up. "Vanessa's arraignment is being moved up. The DA wants to speak with us beforehand." The courthouse bustled with activity as Thomas and Claire were ushered into a conference room where District Attorney Eleanor Phillips waited with Detective Morris. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," Phillips began. "Vanessa's attorney has proposed a deal." "What kind of deal?" Thomas asked warily. "She'll plead guilty to kidnapping and conspiracy charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. 15 years instead of 25 to life, and she'll provide a full confession, naming all accomplices." "Absolutely not," Thomas said immediately. "After what she did to Claire, to our family." "Dad," Claire interrupted gently. "Let's hear them out." Phillips nodded gratefully. "A trial would be lengthy, public, and painful for everyone involved. Claire would have to testify, reliving her trauma in front of the world, and trials are unpredictable. A jury might sympathize with Vanessa's mental state. Mental state, Thomas scoffed. She's not insane. She's evil. Her attorney will argue diminished capacity due to extreme psychological pressure and childhood trauma, Phillips explained. There are records of her psychiatric treatment dating back to her teens. Claire looked surprised. I didn't know that. Thomas ran a hand through his silver hair. Our father was a difficult man. Vanessa struggled with his expectations, his criticism, but that doesn't excuse what she did. Claire placed a hand on her father's arm. Maybe we should consider it. A guaranteed conviction. No trial circus. No risk of her walking free on some technicality. There's something else, Detective Morris added. Vanessa has agreed to a supervised meeting with both of you before finalizing the plea. She says there are things you need to know. About the kidnapping, about Claire's time away. Thomas's expression hardened. Absolutely not. I have nothing to say to her. I'll do it, Claire said firmly. Everyone turned to her in surprise. Claire, you don't have to, Thomas began. Yes, I do, she interrupted. I have questions only she can answer, about those missing years, about what happened to me. I need to know. The meeting was arranged for that afternoon in a secure conference room at the courthouse. Vanessa would be brought from her cell, handcuffed and under guard. Thomas paced the hallway outside, still uncertain about facing his sister. It's not too late to change your mind, he told Claire. She shook her head. I need this, Dad. For 20 years, I've had a hole where my past should be. Vanessa has some of those missing pieces. When they entered the room, Vanessa was already seated at the table, her hands cuffed in front of her. Gone was the impeccable executive in designer clothes. This Vanessa wore a plain orange jumpsuit, her hair falling limp around a face devoid of makeup. She looked older, smaller, almost fragile. Thomas and Claire sat across from her. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Thank you for coming, Vanessa finally said, her voice hoarse. We're not here for you, Thomas replied coldly. We're here for Claire. Vanessa's gaze shifted to her niece. You look more like Marianne now that I see you properly. Same expression when you're thinking hard. Claire leaned forward slightly. Tell me what happened. After I was taken. Where did I go? Why don't I remember? Vanessa sighed. Dawson took you to a house in Georgia first. You were kept sedated for several days while he arranged the next step. Then you were handed off to a woman in Savannah, a nurse with a drug problem who needed money. She was supposed to take you to the Midwest, give you a new identity, but she got spooked when the national media picked up your disappearance. So she abandoned me at the farmer's market, Claire said softly. Vanessa nodded. I didn't know that until years later. By then, you'd already been placed in the orphanage. Your case had gone cold, I thought. I thought it had worked. Why? Thomas demanded, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. Why would you do this to your own family? Something dark flashed in Vanessa's eyes. Family? You mean the family where I was always second best, where Father made it clear every day that you were the golden child, and I was the disappointment, where I worked twice as hard for half the recognition. That doesn't justify, Thomas began. No, it doesn't, Vanessa interrupted. Nothing justifies what I did, but you asked why, and I'm telling you. When Claire was born and Father changed his will to make her the primary heir, something broke inside me. All those years of being overlooked, pushed aside, and now a child, a baby, would someday control what I had worked for my entire life. Claire listened, her expression unreadable. You could have hurt just Dad if you were angry. Why target me? I was 5 years old. Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. Because he loved you more than anything in the world, more than the company, more than his own ambitions. I wanted him to feel what I had felt my entire life. Worthless, forgotten, discarded. The raw honesty of the admission stunned them into silence. I didn't order Dawson to hurt you, Vanessa continued, looking at Claire. Just to take you far away, give you a new life. In my twisted thinking, I even believed I was saving you from this family's dysfunction. Thomas shook his head in disgust. Don't pretend this was anything but revenge and greed. It was both, Vanessa admitted, and jealousy, and rage, and a lifetime of feeling invisible. Claire studied her aunt's face. What about Marina? You tried to have her killed." "I panicked," Vanessa said, looking down at her cuffed hands. "Everything was unraveling. I'd built a life, a position, a reputation. All of it threatened when you reappeared." "You've destroyed yourself," Thomas said. "And for what? What did any of it get you in the end?" Vanessa looked up, her eyes suddenly brimming with tears. "I've had 20 years to regret what I did. 20 years watching you grieve, watching Marianne die of a broken heart. I told myself it was too late to undo it, that the kindest thing was to leave it buried in the past." "That wasn't your decision to make," Claire said firmly. "No," Vanessa agreed. "It wasn't." A heavy silence filled the room. "The DA mentioned your psychiatric history," Claire said eventually, "that you were treated as a teenager." Vanessa's jaw tightened. Father's idea of parenting included constant criticism, emotional manipulation, and occasional physical discipline. "I started having episodes when I was 15, rage, depression, self-harm. The doctors called it various things over the years." Thomas looked shocked. "I never knew it was that bad." "You weren't supposed to," Vanessa replied bitterly. Father's perfect son couldn't be bothered with his sister's inconvenient mental problems. Before Thomas could respond, Vanessa suddenly clutched her chest, her face contorting in pain. "Vanessa," Claire stood in alarm. "Can't breathe," Vanessa gasped. Slumping forward, Thomas called for help as Vanessa collapsed onto the table, her breathing rapid and shallow. "Heart, pills," she managed, gesturing weakly toward her pocket. Guards rushed in, followed by a medical team, as they worked on Vanessa. Administering emergency treatment, Claire and Thomas were ushered out to the hallway. "What happened?" Detective Morris demanded. "Some kind of attack," Thomas replied, shaken. "She just collapsed." They waited anxiously as medical personnel rushed in and out. Finally, a doctor approached them. "She's stable for now, but she needs to get to a hospital immediately. Appears to be a serious cardiac event." As they wheeled Vanessa past on a gurney, her eyes briefly met Claire's. Something unspoken passed between them. A recognition, perhaps even a plea for forgiveness that neither of them was ready to acknowledge. Vanessa survived the heart attack, but it left her weakened and facing a long recovery. The doctors attributed it to years of stress, poor lifestyle choices, and the sudden shock of her arrest. For the next 3 days, she remained under guard in Charleston Memorial's cardiac wing, the same hospital where Marina Chen was slowly recovering from her accident. Claire visited Marina first. The young assistant looked fragile in her hospital bed. Surrounded by monitors, and with her legs suspended in traction, despite her injuries, Marina's eyes brightened when Claire entered. "You came," she said softly. "Of course." Claire placed a small bouquet of flowers on the bedside table. "How are you feeling?" "Like I was hit by a car," Marina replied with a weak smile. "Which, technically, I was." Claire pulled a chair close to the bed. "The police found the driver. He confessed that Vanessa paid him to run you off the road." Marina nodded. "I'm not surprised. I knew the risks when I decided to help you." "Why did you?" Claire asked. "Really?" Marina was quiet for a moment. "Working for Vanessa. I saw what power and wealth could do to someone who let fear and hatred consume them. When I realized what she'd done to you." She paused. "Some choices define who we are. I couldn't be part of it anymore." Claire squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you doesn't seem adequate." "It's enough," Marina assured her. "What happens now with Vanessa?" "That's actually why I'm here," Claire explained. "She's in this same hospital, recovering from a heart attack. Her attorneys are still pushing for a plea deal, and the DA wants my input." Marina studied Claire's face. "You're considering mercy, aren't you?" Claire nodded slowly. "Is that crazy? After everything she did?" "No," Marina said thoughtfully. "It's human. Revenge is easy. Forgiveness is harder, but it's also liberating." After promising to visit again soon, Claire made her way to the secure wing where Vanessa was being treated. Thomas had refused to join her, his anger still too raw, too consuming. "I can't forgive her, Claire," he had said. "Maybe that makes me a lesser person, but I just can't." Claire understood. The wounds Vanessa had inflicted on her father had festered for 20 years, poisoning his life in ways she was only beginning to comprehend. A police officer stood guard outside Vanessa's room, He checked Claire's ID, then nodded her through. Inside, the room was dim. The only sounds the steady beep of monitors and Vanessa's labored breathing. Claire's aunt looked shockingly frail, her skin gray against the white hospital sheets. For a moment, Claire thought she was sleeping, but as she approached the bed, Vanessa's eyes opened. "Claire," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You came." "Yes." Claire remained standing, unsure of the protocol for visiting your kidnapper in the hospital. Vanessa gestured weakly toward a chair. "Please, sit." Claire hesitated, then sat. "How are you feeling?" A ghost of a smile touched Vanessa's lips. "Like my life is falling apart." "How's Marina?" "Recovering," Claire said. "She'll need more surgeries, but the doctors are optimistic." Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. "I never meant for it to go this far. One bad decision led to another, and another, until you were having people run off roads and hiring kidnappers," Claire finished. "Yes." Vanessa opened her eyes again. "My attorney says you're meeting with the DA tomorrow about my plea deal." "I am. What will you tell them?" Claire considered this. "I haven't decided yet." Vanessa shifted slightly, wincing at the movement. "I wouldn't blame you if you demanded the maximum sentence." "God knows I deserve it." "Yes, you do," Claire agreed. "But I'm not here to talk about punishment. I'm here to understand." Vanessa looked surprised. "Understand what?" "What happened to me after I was taken? The missing years? The gaps in my memory?" Vanessa's expression grew troubled. "I don't know all of it. Dawson took you to Georgia first. A woman named Ellis Manning was paid to keep you drugged while arrangements were made. The plan was to move you to the Midwest with a new identity, but something went wrong. The sedatives," Claire said. "A memory surfacing. That's why I couldn't remember. They kept giving me something that made me sleepy, confused." Vanessa nodded. "According to Dawson, Manning got nervous when the news coverage intensified. She was supposed to deliver you to a couple in Ohio who couldn't have children. But instead, she abandoned you at the market in Savannah and disappeared with the rest of the money. So I was meant to be adopted, to never know who I really was. Yes, a clean break, a new life." Claire's voice hardened. "You make it sound almost generous." "It wasn't," Vanessa admitted. "It was cruel and selfish. But in my twisted thinking, I believed I was giving you a chance at a normal life, away from the Ellington legacy and expectations." Claire shook her head in disbelief. "And what about my parents? Did you ever consider what losing me would do to them?" Vanessa's face contorted with pain that had nothing to do with her physical condition. "I wanted Thomas to suffer. Marianne was collateral damage. I didn't anticipate how completely it would destroy her. It killed her," Claire said flatly. "The doctors called it cancer, but Dad says she gave up fighting after years of grief." Tears slipped from the corners of Vanessa's eyes. "I know. I watched it happen. Told myself it was too late to fix what I'd done, that the truth would only cause more pain. Each year it became easier to bury it deeper." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of 20 lost years hanging between them. Finally, Claire spoke. "There's something I need to know. The orphanage director, Jerome Wilkins, was he involved from the beginning?" Vanessa shook her head. "No. I contacted him 6 months after you disappeared, when I learned you'd been placed at St. Catherine's. I paid him to destroy any records that might help identify you if the police ever came looking. And he agreed, just like that." "Money is persuasive," Vanessa said tiredly, "especially to a man with gambling debts and a taste for expensive escorts." Claire absorbed this information. "Is there anyone else? Anyone who helped cover up what happened to me?" "Dr. Raymond Peterson at Coastal Labs. I paid him to be ready to discredit the DNA tests if they came back positive, but he never actually tampered with anything. The results were already processed when I contacted him." Claire nodded. All the pieces were finally coming together. The puzzle of her stolen life was nearly complete. "What happens now?" Vanessa asked quietly. "Now I have a decision to make," Claire replied, standing. "About the plea deal, about your future." Vanessa reached out a hand, which Claire hesitantly took. "Whatever you decide, I want you to know I'm sorry, not just because I was caught, but because I finally understand what I stole from you, from Thomas, from myself." Claire gently withdrew her hand. "I believe you're sorry, but forgiveness, That's something I'm still working on." As she turned to leave, Vanessa called softly after her. "Claire, there's something in my apartment you should have. In my home office, behind the Degas print. There's a safe. The combination is 10 to 12:05. Claire stilled. "The date I disappeared." "Yes, inside you'll find a journal I've kept since that day. Everything is in there. My thoughts, my justifications, my regrets. It won't excuse what I did, but it might help you understand." "Thank you," Claire said simply, and left. The next morning, Claire met with District Attorney Phillips, Detective Morris, and Thomas in the Day's office. Phillips outlined the terms of Vanessa's plea offer once more. She'll plead guilty to kidnapping and conspiracy, serve 15 years with possibility of parole after 10, and provide complete testimony against all accomplices, Phillips summarized. "In exchange, we drop the attempted murder charge related to Marina Chen." "That seems insufficient," Thomas objected. "She tried to kill an innocent woman." "Marina has agreed to the deal," Morris interjected. "She says she wants to move forward, not spend years reliving the trauma through a trial." All eyes turned to Claire. "What do you think?" Phillips asked. "As the primary victim, your opinion carries significant weight with the judge." Claire took a deep breath. She had spent the night reading Vanessa's journal, a chronicle of jealousy, regret, and eventually, a twisted kind of remorse that never translated into action. "I agreed to the plea deal," she said finally, "with 3 conditions." "Which are?" Phillips asked. "First, full restitution to Marina for her medical expenses and suffering. Second, Vanessa surrenders all her company shares to a trust that will fund a foundation for missing children. And third, she undergoes psychiatric treatment during her incarceration." Thomas looked at his daughter with surprise. "That's more merciful than I expected." Claire met his gaze steadily. "I'm not doing it for her. I'm doing it for us. For our chance to heal and move forward without years of trials and appeals hanging over our heads." Phillips nodded. "I think the judge will accept these terms. I'll draw up the paperwork immediately." As they left the office, Thomas placed an arm around his daughter's shoulders. "You continue to amaze me, Claire. Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become." Claire leaned into her father's embrace, feeling for the first time that perhaps the jagged pieces of her fractured life could finally begin to mend. 1 year later, the Charleston spring arrived in a riot of color, azaleas blooming in vibrant pinks and whites, dogwoods unfurling delicate blossoms, and jasmine perfuming the warm air in the gardens of the Ellington estate. Butterflies danced among newly planted flower beds, their wings catching the morning light. Claire, still hope to many who knew her, though she now comfortably answered to both names, sat on a wrought iron bench near the rose garden, her sketchpad open on her lap. Over the past year, she'd rediscovered her childhood love of art, her drawings growing more confident with each passing month. Today, she was capturing the scene before her, a small group of children exploring the butterfly garden, their faces alight with wonder. "They're having a wonderful time," a voice said behind her. Claire turned to see Marina approaching, her gait still slightly uneven from her injuries but growing stronger each day after months of physical therapy and multiple surgeries. She had made a remarkable recovery. "The first tour group is always my favorite," Claire replied with a smile. "Everything is fresh and new to them." Marina sat beside her, watching the children. "It's amazing what you've accomplished in just a year." The Ellington Foundation for Missing Children had become Claire's passion project. Using the funds from Vanessa's surrendered company shares, worth over $200 million, she had established programs to help find missing children and support those who had been recovered. Like herself, the estate gardens, once private, now hosted regular tours and educational programs for children from underprivileged backgrounds. "We've helped locate 17 children this year," Claire said proudly, "and the trauma recovery program is at capacity." "And how's your own recovery going?" Marina asked gently. Claire's smile turned reflective. "Better. The nightmares are less frequent now. And I've remembered more of my childhood. Good memories, mostly." Her therapy had been intensive. Specialized treatment for adults who had experienced childhood trauma and memory suppression. Week by week, month by month, Claire Ellington had emerged more fully from the shadows of Hope's incomplete identity. "And the business side?" Marina inquired. After recovering, She had accepted Claire's offer to join the foundation as operations director. Challenging, Claire admitted. Business school is kicking my butt, but Dad says I'm a natural. After much consideration, Claire had decided to embrace her dual identity and her birthright. She was taking business courses while working part-time at Ellington Industries, learning the company from the ground up. Despite her status as heiress, the board members who had initially been skeptical had gradually come to respect her intelligence and work ethic. The sound of a car on the gravel driveway drew their attention. Thomas stepped out, looking relaxed in casual clothes. A far cry from the rigid businessman Claire had first encountered at the gas station. "There are my two favorite executives," he called, walking toward them with a package under his arm. Since Claire's return and Vanessa's imprisonment, Thomas had transformed. He had stepped back from day-to-day operations at Ellington Industries, focusing instead on mentoring Claire and supporting the foundation. The haunted look had faded from his eyes, replaced by a contentment neither he nor Claire had thought possible. "How was your visit?" Claire asked, rising to embrace her father. Thomas's expression grew somber. "Difficult, as always, but necessary, I think." He had been to see Vanessa at the women's correctional facility where she was serving her 15-year sentence. Though initially reluctant, he had eventually agreed with Claire that maintaining some contact with his sister was the healthier path forward. "She asked about you," he told Claire. "Said to tell you she's completed another module in her therapy program." Claire nodded. Unsurprised, she corresponded with Vanessa occasionally. Brief, careful letters focused primarily on Vanessa's rehabilitation. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a step away from the consuming bitterness that Claire had feared might take root in her heart. "She sent this for you," Thomas added, handing Claire the package. "It's been checked by prison security." Claire unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a leather-bound volume, a meticulously researched family history of the Ellingtons, compiled by Vanessa during her prison library time. "Her note says she thought you might want to know more about where you came from," Thomas explained. "The family beyond just me and your mother." Claire ran her fingers over the embossed cover. "That's thoughtful. It's her way of trying to make amends," Marina observed. "Giving back some of what she took from you." Claire placed the book in her bag. "I'll read it later. Right now, we have guests to attend to." The three of them walked toward the main house, where the children's tour would conclude with refreshments and a presentation about butterfly conservation, another of Claire's passions. As they approached, Mrs. Winters emerged from the house, now semi-retired but still a beloved presence in Claire's life. She had been overjoyed at Claire's return, becoming a surrogate grandmother figure who helped bridge the gaps in Claire's memories. "Everything's ready inside," she reported. "And Robert called. He'll be joining us for dinner." Robert Sullivan remained Thomas's closest friend and attorney, though he had taken a step back from Ellington Industries to focus on his own family. His guidance had been invaluable during the legal aftermath of Vanessa's arrest and the restructuring of the company. Claire glanced at the blue butterfly painting now hanging prominently in the entrance hall, her childhood artwork that had provided one of the first tangible connections to her past. Beside it hung a newer piece, a portrait she had painted of her mother from photographs, capturing Marianne's gentle smile and kind eyes. "I wish she could have seen all this," Claire said softly to her father. Thomas squeezed her shoulder. "She knows, sweetheart. Somehow she knows." That evening, after the tour groups had departed and dinner with Robert concluded, Claire retreated to her suite in the east wing of the mansion. She had chosen not to use her old childhood bedroom, preferring instead to create a space that honored both aspects of her identity, Claire's privileged past and Hope's hard-earned resilience. The room combined elegant antiques with simpler modern pieces. Photos from both halves of her life adorned the walls, her parents holding her as a baby alongside snapshots of friends from her years as Hope. On her desk sat a framed photograph of the gas station where Thomas had found her, a reminder of the extraordinary twist of fate that had reunited them. Claire opened her laptop to check emails before bed. The foundation's work never truly stopped. With cases of missing children requiring constant attention, she had just finished responding to a message from their lead investigator when a new email arrived, from Sister Agnes at St. Catherine's Orphanage. She opened it curiously. After Jerome Wilkins's arrest for his role in covering up Claire's identity, Sister Agnes had taken over as director, implementing sweeping reforms with financial support from the Ellington Foundation. The message was brief but startling. Dear Hope Claire, during our ongoing review of Director Wilkins's hidden files, we've discovered something that may interest you. A boy was brought to us in late 2005, approximately 3 months after you arrived, with similar circumstances. No memory, no identification. He was quickly adopted by a family from Virginia. Given the timing and similarities, we thought you should know. Please call me if you wish to discuss further. Claire stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Another child with no memory, arriving shortly after her. Could it be coincidence? She picked up her mother's diary, which Thomas had given her after her return. She had read it countless times over the past year, treasuring the connection to the mother she barely remembered. Turning to the final entries before her disappearance, she reread a passage that had always puzzled her. Thomas doesn't want to tell Claire yet. He says 5 is too young to understand, that we should wait until she's older, but soon she'll notice changes. Ask questions. How do you explain to a child that her world is about to expand in ways she can't imagine? That what she's always known is only part of the truth? Claire had assumed her mother was referring to something mundane, a planned move, perhaps, or a change in schools. But now a different possibility took shape in her mind. She turned to the leather-bound family history Vanessa had sent. Opening to the first page, she found a detailed Ellington family tree. Her eyes traced the branches until they reached her parents, then stopped in shock. There, beneath Thomas and Marianne Ellington, were 2 names, Claire Elizabeth Ellington and Caleb Thomas Ellington, twins. Claire's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone and dialed her father's extension. Dad, I need to talk to you right away. I think I may have a brother. As she waited for Thomas to arrive, Claire touched the butterfly pendant at her neck, the talisman that had preserved her identity through 20 lost years. Now it seemed to pulse with new possibility, a connection not just to her past, but perhaps to a future with family she hadn't known existed. Outside her window, the Charleston night was velvet dark and scattered with stars. A new chapter was beginning, one that Claire Hope Ellington was finally ready to embrace.